is a production of the World History Since the 15th Century class at London Christian High, 2021. We are Jesse and Ezra, and today we will be talking about the Ottoman Empire. This is not a place whose background we share, but we are hoping to use our research skills to share this lesser-known history, and in an effort to foster community and understanding. We are not a voice for the Turkish people. We are basing our information on written historical evidence. We encourage you, the listener, to find out more. Also, please forgive us if our pronunciations are not correct, despite our efforts to learn the proper pronunciations to honor this culture.
Good morning, grade 12 history students, and welcome to History News, your least trusted source on all matters of history. I'm your host, Brian Babelmouth, and today we look at the spectacular decline of the Ottoman Empire, with our main secondary sources being the Encyclopedia Britannica, A Concise History of the Middle East, and Istanbul, and including various primary sources from modern world history. Take out some popcorn, people. This is going to be a long one. We will be starting our broadcast today with our sports anchor, Stephen Swordwielder, who will be commenting on this last season between the Ottomans and Russians, courtesy of Encyclopedia Britannica.
Thank you, Battleman. I'm here in the Balkans, where the Russians and the Ottomans had a truly epic series of wars over territory, glory, and, most importantly of all, the grand prize, control of the Black Sea. With 12 different games fought and many troops and money spent, it's fair to say this season will be remembered for years to come. The first game was played from 1676 to 1681. Was played in Ukraine and was started by the Russians, who, in the end, lost.
All right. Now that is a very good start for our very own Ottoman Empire.
Unfortunately, their victory was short-lived. In the next game of 1695 to 1696, the Russian Tsar Peter the Great's forces succeeded in capturing the fortress of Azov. This was the first sign that Russia could well gain the upper hand. Regardless, things still favored the Ottomans. In the game known as the Northern War, the Russians lost in their attempt to liberate the Balkans, with that game going to the Ottomans. Then, in the next match, in 1735, the Russians did well, but a poor performance by their allies, the Austrians, meant that things stayed more or less the same.
Great! It might not be the cleanest victory ever, but as long as the Ottomans are winning, I'm happy.
Well, then I'm about to make you very sad indeed. See, the Russians got a new coach, Catherine the Great, an absolutely brilliant strategist. Her first big game happened in 1774, when the Ottomans demanded Catherine stop interfering in the country of Poland. The Russians then beat the Ottomans in Azov, Crimea, and Bessarabia, and under the Field Marshal P.A. Rumyantsev, they overrun Moldavia, and also defeated the Turks in Bulgaria. The Turks were compelled to seek peace, which was concluded in the Treaty of Kutyak-Kainarka, July 21, 1774. This treaty made the Crimean Khanate independent of the Turkish Sultan, advanced the Russian frontier southward to the southern Pandavy River, and gave Russia the right to maintain a fleet on the Black Sea, and assigned Russia vague rights of protection over the Ottoman Sultan's Orthodox Christian subjects throughout the Balkans.
Oh no. How could this have happened?
What can I say? Catherine knew what she was doing. Anyway, that game placed Russia in a position to expand, and in 1783, Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula. Another game happened in 1787, with Austria once again on the side of Russia. The Russians won, and unfortunately, we had to sign the Treaty of Jassy on January 9, 1792. By this treaty, the Ottoman Empire ceded the entire Ukrainian Black Sea coast, from the Kerch Strait westward to the mouth of the Dniester, to Russia. Their next game came when the Ottomans tried to fire some Russian-leaning governors in 1806. The Ottomans lost and had to give up Bessarabia to the Russians.
I'm afraid to ask what happened next.
The Greeks started to struggle for independence. The Ottomans had to give Russia most of the eastern shore of the Black Sea. and they recognized Russia's sovereignty over Georgia and parts of present-day Armenia.
Come on, please, just give me one more victory, please.
All right, I will. In the Crimean War of 1853 to 1856, Britain and France joined the Ottomans, and together they succeeded in forcing Russia into a serious diplomatic setback.
Ha! I knew the Ottomans could do it. No nation in Europe could continue to beat us forever.
Don't celebrate yet. This was a well-needed victory for the Ottomans, but unfortunately, it wouldn't last. The last game was the most important one, in 1877 to 1878. Russia and its ally Serbia went to war for Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Bulgaria for their wars of independence. They freed Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro from Turkish rule, gave autonomy to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and created a huge autonomous Bulgaria under Russian protection, while some last-minute intervention by Britain cut these gains down considerably, as Ottomans were still greatly weakened. As you can see, this season was truly a disaster for the Ottomans, and here to look at why, we have William Eaton, a fabulous sports columnist, straight from the British Empire, here to talk about his recent article, A Survey of the Ottoman Empire. So what do you think went wrong here?
Well, it is undeniable that the power of the Turks was once formidable to their neighbors, not by their numbers only, but by their military and civil institutions, far surpassing those of their opponents.
But
the Turks refuse all reform. They are seditious and mutinous. Their armies are encumbered with immense baggage, and their camp has all the conveniences of a town, with shops, etc. For such was their ancient custom when they wandered with their hordes. When their sudden fury is abated, which is at the least obstinate resistance, they are seized with a panic and have no rallying as formerly. The cavalry is as much afraid of their own infantry as of the enemy. For in a defeat, they fire at them to get their horses to escape more quickly. In short, it is a mob assembled rather than an army levied. None of those numerous details of a well-organized body, necessary to give quickness, strength, and regularity to its actions, to avoid confusions, to repair damages, to apply to every part to some use, no systematic attack, defense, or retreat, no accident foreseen nor provided for.
So what you're saying is that the army is slow, rebellious, and basically behave like an unruly mob.
Exactly.
Harsh.
But fair. The Ottoman Empire's military is a disaster. Right now, they really need to modernize, or they will undoubtedly be overtaken by every major European power, if it's not already too late.
But how?
Well, I don't really know, but the Sultan better figure it out soon.
Well, there you have it, folks. The Ottoman Empire is truly in trouble. With that done, I'll have to turn things back over to Brian. History News will return after a quick word from our sponsors. Hello, fellow watchers of History News. I'm Samuel Snakeoil, and I'm here to talk to you about our wonderful sponsors, Historical Thinking Concepts. Historical thinking concepts are your greatest tool for examining all of history's wonderful complexities, just like a real historian. Take, for example, historical significance. Let's take the example of the Russo-Turkish Wars. The Russo-Turkish Wars' most obvious effect was to lose the Ottomans a lot of territory. However, if you look closer, they had a lot of other effects as well. For example, they showed that the Ottoman Empire was in a state of decline, changing how other European powers saw them. They also gave Russia access to the Black Sea, giving it access to warm water ports. So don't delay. Make use of historical thinking concepts today. Side effects of historical thinking concepts may include a better view of history, better understanding of how current events are shaped by history, everything becoming way too complicated and difficult, a sense that you will never truly understand anything, existential dread, nausea, headaches, death. If you would like to order your free trial of historical thinking concepts, please dial 123-456-789. But don't actually, because this isn't a real commercial, and we won't answer.
And with that dour note, we move on to what will hopefully be a less depressing topic, the weather. We'll start with a rundown of recent weather systems before we move on to this century's forecast, courtesy of Encyclopedia Britannica. Roughly 3.5 centuries ago, a major financial storm clashed with a sudden population boom, resulting in a Class 5 revolt. That's actually 5 major revolts between 1500 and 1660. Things stabilized in the 1700s somewhat as these two storms slowly changed into a powerful feudal system which swept through much of the empire, though relatively little changed in regards to the central authority of the government, which remained very limited. In the last century, the weather has continued to improve, as a major centralization front significantly reformed the Ottoman military and government, improving internal stability. A second reform-based storm continued the modernization of our glorious Ottoman Empire until roughly 1875. Most recently, however, a major unrest front has struck our Balkan territories, but turns out this isn't a problem anymore as we don't own those Balkan territories anymore. It's Russia's problem now, but I wouldn't worry about it. It's not as if it's going to start a world war or something. Now that would be funny. Now for our forecast. Most experts predict a serious constitutional front to come in from the west, which might come into conflict with a homegrown nationalist storm system, with the general result expected to be even more internal instability, maybe a bit of dictatorship, and possibly a couple of coups. And, that's your centennial weather forecast, and I so very much hope that this does not get worse.
History News will return after a quick word from our sponsors. Hey, look at that. It's you again. Unless you're someone else, I can't tell. This was pre-recorded, and I can't actually see you. It's me again, Samuel Snake Oil, and like always, I'm trying to sell you something. This time, it's another historical thinking concept. This time, it's continuity and change. Let's start with some continuity. You'll notice that despite all the results and revolts and whatnot in the previous segment, the Sultan still remained the ruler of the Ottoman Empire. In fact, the Ottoman Empire continued to have a Sultan for quite some time. Does that mean nothing has changed? Absolutely not. The Ottoman Empire was massively destabilized because of this. In fact, I believe that one of History News' field reporters, who, of course, is an entirely different person than me, is going to look at that in our next segment. Remember, continuity and change is an important part of examining history, so make sure you buy it at a store near you. Side effects of continuity and change may include a better view of history, better understanding of how current events are shaped by history, everything becoming way too complicated and difficult, a sense that you will never truly understand anything. Wondering whether I'm just going to list the same side effects as last time. Vivid hallucinations, an acute pain in your left toenail, deja vu. Losing all your money at a casino, deja vu. If you would like to order your free trial of historical thinking concepts, please dial 123-456-789. But don't actually, because this isn't a real commercial, and we won't answer.
Now that we've talked about the truly horrible weather conditions, we'd like to see how the government's doing. Speaking, of course, to our wonderful political correspondent, Adam Anklebiter, reporting live from the Palace of the Sultan himself in Istanbul.
Thank you, Brian. I'm currently right outside the Sultan's throne room to report on the immediate history of our Sultanate and its immediate future.
All right, tell me, Adam, do you think our wonderful government can handle the crises the weather is throwing at it?
Oh, absolutely not.
How so? Surely you aren't criticizing the Sultanate.
Well, it's weak, ineffective, and we haven't had a sultan with military experience since Murid IV.
I'm sorry, but we were the most powerful nation in Europe.
Indeed we were, during the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent. A Dutch ambassador, Oligar Jinsin de Busquois, absolutely lavished the Ottomans with praise in his Turkish letters, especially in his excerpt from Letter 1. There is no district with any considerable amount of population, no borough or city, which is not a detachment of Janissaries to protect the Christians, Jews, and other helpless peoples from outrage and wrong. And some other quotes. But there was not all in that assembly a single man who owed his position to aught save his valor and his merit. No distinction is attached to birth among the Turks. The deference to be paid for a man is measured by the position he holds in public service. And one final quote. The highest offices from the Sultan are for the most part the sons and shepherds or herdsmen, and so far from being ashamed of their parentage, they actually glory in it, and consider it a matter of boasting that they owe nothing to the accident of birth, for they do not believe the high qualities are either natural or hereditary, nor do they think that they can be handed down from father to son, but they are partly the gift of God, and partly the result of good training, great industry, and unwearied zeal, arguing that high qualities do not descend from a father to his son or heir, any more than a talent for music, mathematics, or the like, and that the mind does not derive its origin from the Father, so that the Son should necessarily be like the Father in character, but emanates from heaven, and is thence infused into the human body.
Now that sounds like the Ottoman Empire that dominated the Middle East and Southern Europe.
To be sure, the Ottoman Empire of the mid-1500s was a powerhouse of a nation, though this has changed.
Impossible! How dare you insult our glorious empire?
Well, in my research on this topic, I found many insights from sources like the Encyclopedia Britannica and A Concise History of the Middle East, particularly in pages 137 to 180 of the latter.
Impossible! No scholar would state these lies.
All right, just to placate you, we'll start with what once made the Ottoman Empire great before we describe its downfall. Anyway, the Ottoman Empire then, just as it does now, organized the lower classes into communities called millets. A millet was a largely self-governing organization with members of an individual millet sharing a religion. These millets had considerable autonomy until the last few decades, so long as they maintained internal security and paid the Sultan their dues. The lower classes, as has been normal in most of the world until now, were, and still are, ruled by a much smaller upper class.
Sounds pretty normal for the times. But were these class distinctions hereditary?
Actually, not completely. One of the things that set the Ottoman Empire apart to a greater degree from the European systems was a higher degree of social mobility. In order to be part of the ruling class, you had to swear loyalty to the Sultan, be a devout Muslim, and be very familiar with a complex system of social behaviors called the Ottoman Way.
And this is unusual?
This level of social mobility, especially compared to our European contemporaries, is quite unusual, especially the fact that not only could low-born individuals move up the social ladder based on merit, but high-born individuals could be stripped of their upper-classness and move down the social ladder, enabling a far more merit-based society.
Finally, I knew our glorious Ottoman Empire was the greatest nation on earth.
Well, it was the greatest nation on earth.
No.
The problems actually began with the golden age of the Ottoman Empire. In an attempt to rid himself of such tedious responsibilities as ruling his empire, Suleiman the Magnificent created the position of the Grand Vizier, who had near absolute authority and was second only to the Sultan himself.
What's wrong with a ruler enjoying the spoils of his incredible victories?
Well, it wouldn't have been such a problem if it hadn't been for the Devshirme achieving absolute political power.
The who?
The Devshirme, like the Janissaries, were children from Christian families brought up as Muslim and loyal to the Sultan, except rather than soldiers, they were bureaucrats. The Sultan had traditionally kept them in check by playing them against Turkish notables, but about the mid-1500s they managed to gain total political control over Istanbul and immediately began trying to limit the authority of the Sultan.
And how would anyone limit the authority of the most sublime and powerful ruler in all of the world?
By ensuring that the heirs to the Sultanate are uneducated and inexperienced, so they are less likely to exert their power. In addition, the government-owned holdings, typically used to fund parts of the military and treasury, became controlled by different bureaucrats and basically turned into private property, hurting the imperial treasury.
But if this started happening near the end of Suleiman the Magnificent's reign, why did it still take another century before we started losing territory? Surely the internal problems couldn't have been that bad.
Actually, things became worse. The Devshirme fighting over power meant that the very little government effort was focused on the well-being of the nation. While the military remained strong enough that no one could actually take over, food shortages, droughts, and other problems meant that for quite some time there was almost no government control outside of major cities, and much of the countryside was infested with bandits. We didn't start losing territory right away because we still looked too strong to take out. We had a large military, a ridiculous amount of territory, and most of our internal crises weren't all that visible to the outside world.
But surely if things were this terrible, the government would have eventually had to collapse.
Actually, the problems sort of solved themselves. Eventually, local notables managed to seize control of the swaths of territory and maintain legitimacy by providing funds or military support to the Sultan. It didn't stop us hemorrhaging territory, but it helped the government remain, at the very least, nominal control.
But the weather recap said things get better, right? We return to our historical prominence, importance, and general awesomeness?
Sort of? But we certainly never regained what we had under Suleiman the Magnificent. Most earlier attempts to reform were faced with heavy resistance and were only sort of successful, though the Sultan began to exert more power again. But it was primarily in the 1800s when serious reform began to take root, particularly in 1826, when the Sultan Mahmud II announced plans for a new European-style army. In response, the Janissaries protested and were massacred, clearing the way for Mahmud to do what he wished. Through his reign, Mahmud II managed to modernize the army and centralize the nation, but he lost quite a bit of territory to revolts and to Russia. The biggest changes actually came under Mahmud's successor, his son Abdulhamid. Under his reign, major westernizing reforms, known as the Tanzimates, occurred, reforming many parts of the empire. While there were positive effects to these reforms, foreign powers, especially France, Russia, and Britain, meddled more and more in Ottoman politics and trade.
Well, this sounds like some progress, though all of this foreign influence sounds worrying, but I'm sure it's all fine and necessary for the return of our Ottoman Empire to the position it undeniably deserves.
Well, more recent political events have undermined that progress. A group called the New Ottomans staged a coup, removed the Sultan, and placed a new Sultan on the throne, and established a parliament in the middle of a war that Russia was threatening to join. This turned into the last Russo-Turkish War, and lost us even more Balkan territory. Oh, and the new Sultan was insane. The New Ottomans then removed the Sultan that they had just put in power, and put his brother on the throne, who, as a result of the Russo-Turkish War, dissolved the parliament and ruled as a dictator for 30 years. The new and current Sultan, Abdulhamid, took advantage of how some of his predecessors had managed to centralize the government to strengthen his dictatorship.
Good. Our Sultan has power again. This will enable us to once more claim the position of the greatest nation in all of the world.
Our Sultan is also paranoid, incompetent, prone to fits of mass murder, and has allowed our military to once again be rendered obsolete and irrelevant. And a brilliant leader that deserves our full support. He's the best. Ignore everything I just said. Now, if you'll excuse me, the Sultan's guard are putting me in a dungeon. For my protection, of course. We wouldn't want the murderous rebels to get me. I'm gonna have to sign up now. Goodbye. Ow, stop that. It's still recording, Mormons.
Well, I hope he's all right. And now, let's get back to sports. Specifically, a special sports history segment, Tearing into Treaties. Primary sources provided by Modern World History, where we look at various treaties made by the Ottoman Empire with our field reporter, Daniel Dealmaker.
Thank you, Brian. I'm here to discuss 3 treaties recently made by the Ottoman Empire, starting with an older treaty made by the Austrian Empire, the Treaty of Karlowitz. Signed on January 6, 1699, this piece of paper was a sign of the beginning of the end of the greatness of the Ottoman Empire, and proved the Austrians a true European power. It was truly a big deal, ending the Austro-Turkish War, which had then been going on for 16 years. To quote the treaty itself, after a savage, destructive war, cruel by the reason of great shedding of human blood, with the destruction of many provinces that had raged for 16 years, to this time, between the most serene and most powerful Prince and Lord Leopold on one side, and the most serene and most powerful Prince and Lord Sultan Mustafa Khan, Emperor of the Ottomans and of Asia, and Greece, and his glorious predecessors on the other side. These two were moved to compassion at length by the extremely distressing fate of their subjects, and the aforesaid 2 most powerful empires resolved in earnest to put an end to such great evils for the human race, which were daily increasing. But you shouldn't be fooled by all the flattering words, as his most serene and most powerful sultan was facing an absolutely devastating defeat. We're talking about the loss of countries here, folks. Croatia, Slovenia, Transylvania, and most of Hungary all went to Mr. Prince Leopold, and however nice the treaty may have sounded, the Ottomans cannot have been happy about it.
But surely the Ottomans can't have taken that lying down.
Oh, they didn't. They fought a whole second war over it, in 1716 to 1718.
So how did that go?
They lost the rest of Hungary and won back absolutely nothing.
Well, how did the second treaty we're looking at go? Better, I hope.
Oh, definitely not. This treaty was made after the Ottomans' disastrous season with the Russians.
Oh no, not the Russo-Turkish wars.
I'm afraid so, Babblemouth. This treaty, the Treaty of Kuchak-Kainatchet, was a truly painful treaty for the Ottomans. It stipulates that neither empire would discriminate against the religion of the other.
Well, that's not so bad. The Ottomans weren't doing that anyways.
You didn't let me finish. The treaty also stipulated that the Russians were to be given a strip of the Black Sea coast between the Bug and Dnieper rivers, the much-contested port city of Azov, and parts of the Tatar-inhabited Crimea. Also, Russia got free passage for its trading ships through the Ottoman-controlled Dardanelles, the narrow strait linking the Black Sea to the Mediterranean.
Well, it's not nearly as bad as that disastrous treaty with the Austrians.
Maybe, but this is far from the only treaty that will come out of the Russo-Turkish wars, and we all know how those wound up going.
Not well.
Not well indeed.
Well, this has been our truly depressing segment on the once great Ottoman Empire's decline. We hope you enjoyed listening. I sure didn't. Have a better day than the Ottoman Empire. And thank you all for your time.